Welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to some Hurricane Mark IV gameplay in realistic air battles. And I think what you will see in this numerous battle scenes that I will show you is kind of good background footage for the argumentation that I will make. But before we go into the argumentation and the topic of this video, I want you to know that I thought about the comments and all that from the last video where I scratched on that topic. That was Noobs of the Sky 2.0, where I wanted to point out that the German planes, in particular the Focke-Wulfs, have a very hard time against properly flown Spitfires because they have literally no advantage that they could exploit to really overcome a decent Spitfire pilot. It is always possible to overcome a beginner that does not know anything about tactics or so on, but a proper Spitfire pilot just doesn't give any room to a Focke-Wulf pilot, so that the Focke-Wulf pilot would get guns on a Spitfire. That was practically all that I wanted to say, and furthermore there are some game mechanics or game limitations that further enhance this disadvantage and kind of unfairness. Funnily enough, for both the Focke-Wulfs and also the Bf-109s, the early models, in particular the E series of the Bf-109s and the A1 in particular for the Focke-Wulfs, are in my opinion tier for tier the best ones in their respective line. And I also have a video up, I guess, of the Bf-109 E4 where I up-tiered it, and I just overcame many Spitfire pilots that just were expecting another Bf-109 variant. So what I want to talk about today is kind of another part of the entire story of not just RRB but in general, and that has to do with the damage model, and that we have problems for a long time, particularly when it comes to the mix of how the damage model for plane works and how the damage output of guns and certain ammunition types works. We had patches where it felt right, where a single shell did not kill the enemy but it did damage, and if you put numerous shells into a section of a plane, you did enough damage. And certain ammunition types performed much better than others. Then in the next patch it was changed around and it felt like unplayable. Then in the next patch it was reworked again, and so on and so on. But it was always like sometimes the gun did no damage at all and then they one-shotted everything. And so it seemed like Gaijin had massive problems kind of adjusting or fine-tuning the damage output. Let's put it that way. What you see in the background here is clearly me hitting numerous 40mm high explosive fragmentation shells on enemy fighters and bombers, and sometimes one-shotting them, as I kind of expected from this kind of caliber of shell at this battle rating. On the other hand, sometimes I put numerous shells into the enemy and they don't go down immediately, and you could see the enemy planes actually do take damage. So it was not like the sparking where the server didn't register the hit. Furthermore, you can see that the ping and also the packet loss is low in both cases and stable. So how is the damage output calculated? Well, to make it short, I can't tell you. I simply can't tell you how it is calculated. What I can tell you is that in numerous patches it didn't seem right. Particularly when we compare fighters and bombers. When I began to play War Thunder, bombers had nearly the same kind of life expectancy against a Spitfire attacking as a Bf-109 when receiving the same amount of hits. Then we got the patch where bombers got significantly buffed, but then they were over buffed and they were nearly unkillable. When I researched my B409 G6, first of all, it was in arcade. It felt clumsy, heavy, and had nothing going for it in comparison to the G2. But the 30mm cannons. And then at that time when I researched it, it was just awesome when I got my hands on a 30mm. I just could kill bombers very reliable and faster than with 20mm, as you kind of would expect. Of course, you know, the 20mm had a higher shell density, they were more accurate, and they had a better muzzle velocity, so of course they were better suited for the fight against fighters when you had to dogfight them. And the same goes theoretically for realistic. However, in realistic, for numerous patches, I feel like that 20mm are more reliable overall than 30mm when actually hitting the target. And I'm not really sure if it is the composition of the belts for both air targets, but you know, the problem with, for example, German 30mm is that they have a rather high rate of fire for their caliber, but a rather low amount of ammunition. And when you then need like 20 hits to down a bomber, when you actually aim at the wing and you observe the majority of your shots hitting, you know, and actually getting the hit message, then it kind of feels awkward when in return you take one shot and you burn and your plane instantly burns down. That doesn't feel fair, right? And you know, again we have come to the argument of fairness in the game. Some said, yeah, it's war, it should be unfair. I agree. However, it is at the end of the day a game, and I want to have a fair fighting chance. However, it then has to rely on my shoulders to put myself into a position where it is rather unfair for the enemy to engage me, but that has to do with my action in the beginning. And so that brings us back to the initial video that started it, the Noobs in the Sky or Noobs of the Sky 2.0. Again, I think not everybody understood the kind of point that I wanted to make in terms of how a Focke-Wulf has problems engaging a Spitfire. First of all, the Spitfire has simply better acceleration, it simply has much higher climb rate, it has much better turning capabilities, and while the Focke-Wulf has a better roll rate, the Spitfire just simply can wait. And while it is always nice to try to make the enemy overshoot, just a beginner makes the error and overshooting you, and even then you have the problems to even get guns on target in that short amount of time, and then your shells are much slower in comparison to for example Hispano cannons. All those drawbacks, you know, I could, you know, agree with if then the Focke-Wulf would have any advantage going for it. But it doesn't have any. Furthermore, we then have the impact of the instructor that really strangles artificially the Focke-Wulf. I will come back to this in a moment. And then, you know, there is the damage model as well. A Spitfire could lose part of its wing, you know, and still be completely combat effective. Not completely, but, you know, enough to turn with Focke-Wulfs while having part of its wing missing. But when a Focke-Wulf loses a part of its wing, it is always, without any exception, counted immediately as a kill and will get down. That is really a unnecessary and unfair uphill fight. Now let's come back to the instructor. The instructor just throws you off target and, you know, limits your movements. Many say that it should prevent you from, you know, flat spinning and that. In theory, yes. However, I made an experience that completely changed my mind on this subject, and it had to do with enduring confrontation. There was one iteration of the enduring confrontation test that happened on Sicily, and it was a 2 days test, if I remember correctly. It is, I guess, over 1 year ago. Might be, I'm not quite sure. However, it was on Sicily, and I remember that clearly. It was not the frontline stage, but it was the extended Sicily map, and on the first day it was like magic, because there was simply no instructor influence, or the influence of the instructor was minimized, but there was no patch note whatsoever, and the German planes just wrecked the enemy hard, because the enemies were just not adapting to the fact that now German planes could get guns on them. It was not that the flight model did change. No, it was the overall controllability. There was no wobbling. There was just a really smooth flight model. It felt like nearly flying a fat Spitfire in terms of controllability, but with better roll rate. You still had a lower climb rate, and the turning circle was still bigger, but it felt better. That is the point. And then the next day it was the other way around, like the chains were tighter than even before, and it was impossible to shoot down any allied plane. And that just showed me that the instructor, in my opinion, is an artificial control factor by Gaijin. If anybody does have, in this case, any kind of information, please let me know. But this day just burned itself into my mind like crazy. And since then I'm complaining about this, because then I could since then I could point my finger at a problem, and since then it always proved to be one of a few sources that led to kind of a disadvantage. Now, don't get me wrong, when a plane is a turn fighter, it obviously should have the advantage in terms of a turning engagement. That is obvious, that is natural, and it should be like that. However, me as flying somebody, in a Bf-109, being an energy fighter, or also flying in a Focke-Wulf as an, boom and Suma, I want to get myself into a position where I actually can use the specific capabilities of that plane. And in this respect, the Focke-Wulf or the Bf-109, using this tactic should be better than the Spitfire, right? Because that was the design philosophy behind it, right? Yeah, but I don't ever have the chance of this, as long as the Spitfire just uses my own tactics against me. I had a very, 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 very easy time flying Spitfires against Bf-109s or Focke-Wulfs, just, climbing and, putting the pressure on them. At the end of the day, they found themselves at low altitude with no speed, and I did not even took one shot. And then they were easy prey, and they were down low where they couldn't run away anymore. So that is what I want to tell about this topic. Now again, coming back to the footage in the background, this is low tier, where I shoot 40mm high explosive shells at the enemy. Some of them again fall apart instantly, others just continue going. And it does not necessarily have to do something with the plane size. Sometimes bombers explode instantly. In the next case, a fighter keeps on turning for a while before he goes down, despite hitting a critical part of that plane. So, I am again not an expert on this, and this is why I keep asking you for your opinions in the comment section. Because, it is just impossible to learn everything about the game, by just trying to do research. sometimes somebody giving me an explanation in a few sentences is worth more than research for days or weeks. So again, let me know what you think about this topic, and if it is really kind of just me being hypocritical in terms of, yeah, I haven't had chance against British planes. Same goes for Russian planes, but I had the footage from a British plane and a German plane, so this is why I built the argumentation on this. But it is the very same for when I fight against Japanese planes in my American fighters. I just have no advantage, initially, and you can't side climb that hard, and by the end of the day you're singled out. But I made also enough videos about this. And then also, when more than that, for example, on some of the Pacific maps, I think it's Saipan, if I'm correctly, where the Americans have all a airfield start, and the non-carrier based Japanese planes have an air start. Wow, that's giving another advantage over all the other advantages. So there's that. Now at this point I actually talked again way too long about actually the same stuff that I talked in the last video. However, one thing that you have to keep in mind is again the damage output and how it is calculated. Do you think this patch is good and balanced, or is it more like that Gaijin should again rework it, and in which way? And what was the patch you remembered where it was kind of best? Let me know in the comment section. And as you could see, I actually enjoyed flying the Hurricane Mark IV. It is a really nice plane. In my opinion, it is a little bit too powerful for that battle rating, but that's my personal opinion. Anyways, that's it for today, so thanks for watching, thanks for listening. Let me know in the comment section again what you think about this entire topic, and give this video a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, and we'll see each other in the skies of War Thunder.